Now, Labor's set its sights on having a 50-50 split of the sexes in its caucuses by 2025. Now, the Liberal Party isn't into quotas, but it does recognise that its current party room has relatively few women in it by recent historical standards of the party. Now, there's an aspiration to lift the number, and Liberal MP Sharman Stone is leading the thinking on how. Well, if the question is, what do women want, and that's an enormously difficult one, then Dr. Stone has a few half answers. She says she knows what they don't want, and that's a lot of what we see and report here every sitting day.
Let us end the debilitating gender divide. So let this conference decide and declare that within the next 10 years, by 2025, 50% of Labor's representatives in Parliament will be women.
We need to encourage more women, more younger women, career-oriented women, women with young families to see that politics is something that they can do. And I don't believe in quotas. I don't believe in quotas for trade. I don't believe in quotas for Parliament. The only determination of whether someone goes into Parliament should be because they're the best candidate for the job, whether they're a man or whether they're a woman.
The coalition is founded on targets and quotas. For example, every time we have an election, the Nats and Libs line up, count how many seats each one, said, right, you get this number of ministries. Now, what's wrong with the gender game being played along the same lines? Parliament is the least family-friendly, unrepresentative, hopeless place that it is.
The Leader of the House will desist.
4 hours a day are spent on rubbish, just screaming matches between the boys.
There he is. He wants to trouser your money, Madam Speaker.
Not rubbish question time where half the questions are Dorothy Dix's, the same questions asked over and over. We all do our emails. Women who look at that say, I don't want to be part of that. We've got to agree that our pre-selections will be different. We'll require equal numbers of men and women in each pre-selection contest.
Certainly I don't support quotas, but I do support finding other means to encourage the right women and the right men into politics.
And I agree with him that we do need to have more women in the ranks of the federal coalition. Well, I've never been in favour of quotas myself, and if I can use the most recent experience of a Liberal Party pre-selection in Queensland, when Senator Mason retired a couple of months ago, we had a pre-selection, and we pre-selected Senator Jo Lindgren, who is an Indigenous woman. I think through the spontaneous processes of the party is the way that this is best done.
Police and security agencies have made their move on the 28-year-old Melbourne man they believe had plans to join the fighting in the Middle East. 28-year-old James Williams of Epping has been in the Melbourne Magistrates Court charged with preparing to travel to a foreign country to engage in hostile activities. He'd been hauled off a flight that was to leave Australia in December last year. Now, as the minister responsible for ASIO, the Attorney-General, George Brandis, will have been well briefed on Mr. Williams, but the attorney is also very guarded about what he can say about his case.
Let me just make this point. It has been a crime against Australian law since 1979 to travel to fight in a foreign civil war. That remains the case, and it should be the case. Now, I understand Assistant Commissioner Gagan has made some observations this morning in which he has reminded Australians of the enormous peril that they put themselves at in travelling to Syria to fight in this war. So it's both a crime, but it is also perilous for them, and any Australian contemplating doing that should not do it. Now, beyond that, the matter is, as you say, before the courts this morning, so it's not appropriate for me to comment beyond that.
Is there any suspicion in this case that his intention may have been to fight for Islamic State and not for Kurdish forces?
It would be quite inappropriate for me to comment on matters that are before the court today, and the question you've asked me would bear directly on what may or may not be led in evidence in the court.
So that was George Brandis just a little earlier. Now, the Greens acting leader, Larissa Waters, has just been holding a media conference in Parliament House on matters of the day. We'll take you to some of that right now. She began talking about new questions over the Speaker, Bronwyn Bishop's travel expense claims.
We see yet more revelations that the Speaker of the House seems to fundamentally misunderstand the notion of parliamentary business in taking flights to a wedding. Weddings are not parliamentary business, and nor are party fundraisers. And it's about time MPs stopped rorting the system, because it's no wonder that the Australian public think that we've all got our snouts in the trough with this sort of conduct. The rules are fairly clear, and any common sense application of ethics would mean that you can avoid these sort of atrocious pitfalls. It's very disappointing that the Speaker continues to have revelations about inappropriate use of her entitlements. And what is the Prime Minister going to do now that Bronwyn Bishop, who's meant to be on probation, has been revealed to be taking yet another dubious entitlement claim to attend somebody's wedding? Where there are genuine grey areas, the Greens have said that as part of setting up a national ICAC, which is much needed, that one of the roles within that ICAC should be an independent parliamentary commissioner to advise parliamentarians on the grey areas of entitlements and get some specificity there where there is genuinely the scope for misinterpretation. But in such gross examples as this, unfortunately it seems that the system is utterly failing taxpayers, and that the conduct of MPs has gone well beyond what anyone could consider appropriate. So just moving now to the scare campaign by the Prime Minister on climate change. Just last week we had the Prime Minister extolling the need for a national conversation on tax without resorting to scare campaigns, and yet just a few days later that same Prime Minister is now descending into high farce when it comes to climate policy, and again confusing an emissions trading scheme with a carbon tax. What a shame that so soon we've seen a departure from that promise of leaving the scare campaigns behind. And when the issue is so serious, and we know that the consequences and the implications for our way of life, for our economy, for our very planet are so severe, why can't the Prime Minister just get some science advice, get up to speed on climate change, and get on board with the necessary action, like we see so many other nations around the world doing? Australia is well and truly a laggard now on climate action, and we see this base and frankly pathetic attack by the Prime Minister on the need for climate action, reducing it to a debate about power bills. Now, we know the evidence shows that more solar actually reduces people's power bills, so the Prime Minister's got his facts wrong anyway. But to reduce the debate about whether we safeguard our economy and our planet for the centuries to come to a question about people's power bills that's based on wrong information is very poor conduct from a man that's meant to be leading this nation and tackling the challenges that we will face going into the next centuries.
Well, Federal Cabinet is meeting in Canberra today. Not all ministers are here, but there are enough to run a meeting. Parliament returns in a fortnight, and one of the questions that might confront it during the spring session is gay marriage. Will there be a new cross-party bill? Would there be a debate? Will the Liberal Party room have a discussion about changing its policy? Well, it's clear from Christopher Pyne, who runs all matters in the House, that the options are far from settled. Here's how that came across with Fran Kelly on Radio National.
I haven't yet seen a cross-party bill. I have seen reporting of a potential cross-party bill, and I think the best way to deal with this, the most appropriate way to deal with it, is to ensure that the debate is respectful, that all sides get an opportunity to put their particular view, the party, the Liberal Party and the National Party, have a policy on this at the moment. Whether it's a conscience vote, if there is a vote on a bill in the spring session or any session, is a matter that we need to discuss. Those people who support marriage equality, and I know that you do, as do many Australians, I think the most likely way of bringing that about is not to try and bludgeon the Parliament into debating it and voting on it, but dealing with it as appropriately and as carefully as possible.
And I'm trying to get a sense of whether you think that then involves this notion, this legislation or this issue of marriage equality coming back into the coalition party room for discussion.
Well, any matter can be raised in the coalition party room.
Should it be raised?
I think it would be a shame if it was raised in such a way as being designed to kill off a discussion about marriage equality. So therefore, I think we need to be careful and sensitive about how this matter is handled. I know that's the way that I and others in the leadership team of the coalition are acting, and I think that the debate within the coalition has been respectful and sensible so far, and I'd like to see that continue.
In the party room?
Well, I'd like to see it continue in all the discussions that we have in the party. I think, for example, Warren Inch has been extremely sensible in not making a public display of anything that he might be doing. He has been wanting to make sure that this debate is held within the party before it's held outside the party. I think that's the most likely way to see a way through this debate.
Now let's move to international relations, and Japan's ambassador to Canberra, Sumio Kusaka, has been giving an address to the National Press Club here in Canberra. He's been outlining the Abe government's policies for the Asia-Pacific and for economic growth, and he's also been touching on regional security matters. And the ambassador has strongly backed the trilateral security arrangement. This ties together Australia, the United States and Japan, and here's his explanation for why that's so valuable.
The trilateral security framework that exists between Japan, Australia, and the US is also an important cooperative relationship. Cooperation between the three nations has been strengthened through joint exercises and the trilateral strategic dialogue. Both Japan and Australia need to further strengthen our trilateral security and defense cooperation with the US. As the only country in history which has suffered from atomic bombings, Japan is determined to promote disarmament and non-proliferation activities and to lead the international community in this regard. In fact, Japan and Australia can collaborate closely on this issue. One good example is the Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Initiative. This is a group of countries that do not possess nuclear weapons and was launched in 2010 by Japan and Australia as central players. It aims to realize a world free of nuclear weapons by proposing realistic and specific measures to achieve nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. Our two nations should work together and in cooperation with others to realize a nuclear-free world.
Now, giving a foreign president an official visit to a capital is a diplomatic honour rationed to preserve its status. If you weren't paying a lot of attention, or if you were instead concentrating on Barack Obama's visit to Kenya and Ethiopia, you might have missed the fact that Tony Abbott is hosting the President of the United Republic of Tanzania, Dr. Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete. The flags are up around Canberra, and Dr. Kikwete was in the Prime Minister's office earlier today. But why is he here? Well, one explanation doing the rounds is that it stems back to undertakings given for Australia's ultimately successful bid for its temporary stint on the UN Security Council. In any event, Mr. Abbott played a welcoming host and talked up the possibility of more Australian miners in Tanzania.
So this is your second visit to Australia.
This way, please.
Haven't you had enough smiles? There are some 18 significant Australian mining companies which have over 100 separate mining operations one way or another in Tanzania. So while we are separated by a great ocean, we are reaching out our hands across the ocean, and I would like to think that as a result of Your Excellency's visit, that the commercial and also the people-to-people links could strengthen over time.
We invite companies now to come and develop the LNG, make use of the natural gas to produce other products. So, well, as you rightly said, I'm here to discuss how to further our relationship at the political level.
Well, it's an honour to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the warm reception and gracious hospitality.
Thank you so much. Thank you.